Hello. Hi, everyone. How are you guys doing? Good. My name is Denise. I wanted to welcome you all to Yamacon. Some of you might have been here yesterday, but if it's your first day this year, welcome. I was going to let you guys know that just a few announcements. If you haven't already, we have a raffle that's for charity to the Sevier County Humane Society. It's $1 a ticket or a food donation for the puppies and kitties. We also are doing a charity auction tomorrow, and we got some great items. So if you'd like to do that, please attend. The raffle, you don't have to be here to win. The prize is 2 free weekend passes for next year. So it's a pretty good deal. It's up at the front where the t-shirts are. Alrighty, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest. I want you to give him a big round of applause. I had to grovel yesterday because I got his name wrong. And so he only cursed one of my unborn children, so I'll just have 2. It'll be fine. His name is J. Michael Tatum, so give him a round of applause.
Hello. Hi. Oh, you're so shy. Don't be shy. Hello. There we go. That's the energy we like. This is my imaginary friend Harvey. He'll be joining me for the panel. I hope you don't mind. He's not very chatty. So how we doing this morning, guys? Good? Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. How many out-of-towners do we have? Oh, that's a lot of you. Okay. Now, who's the furthest? Who drove the farthest? Where'd you come from? How far is that? 3 hours. 7.5. Oh, they've got you beat. Sorry. These just sound like Texas distances. I'm from Texas, where it's 3.5 hours to the store. So we're like, oh, that's okay. You traveled. It's my first time ever in Pigeon Forge. It's really cool. It's really interesting and kind of fun. I don't know what to make of it yet. I think we're going to go to Dollywood this evening. Yeah. Is it worth it? I mean, it seems really cool. I love what? Ride the eagle? You say that, and I'm picturing an eagle. And I like this. I'll tell you all about it Sunday. The lightning rod? The fastest wooden roller coaster. Man, okay, so in Texas we have a place called Six Flags, which is an amusement park that I used to live in the town, like outside of Dallas, where it's located. So it's kind of, I imagine it's kind of like living here and going to Dollywood. Everyone's like, oh my God, it's Dollywood. You're like, yeah, we go there every Saturday. But they had a giant, I don't know if they have it anymore, but it was called the Texas Giant, because Texas has to be just bigger than everybody. And but it was the world's largest, not fastest, but largest wooden roller coaster. And someone thought that was a great idea. Riding it was like being flung around in a dryer. Because it's wood, and so everything is like, and everyone's like, oh, well, there goes my sciatica. So I don't know about the wooden roller coaster, especially if it's fast. Maybe that's because it's really short, and it's like, over. That's my idea of a wooden roller coaster. But I'll have to do it. I'm hoping that Dolly Parton will be there in secret, and that I will discover her. Like, she'll be dressed as Santa Claus, and I'll be like, that's Dolly. I'm going to go sit on Dolly's lap and be like, I've been a very good boy. I would like a football for Christmas. And have her be like, honey, get off my lap. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, Miss Parton. I love Dolly. So when I figured out, when I said yes to this con, I didn't really know. I didn't make the connection that Dolly had anything to do with Pigeon Forge. I didn't know stuff. She is Pigeon Forge, yeah. She kind of made it, but I didn't know. Someone's like, hey, do you want to go to a con in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee? And I'm like, sure, sounds like fun. And then like the week before I came here, like, let's find out some things about Dolly Parton. So I love it. And I know I'm probably not going to see her, but that's already my plan. I'll be Instagramming that. Look who I met, Dolly Parton, from 30 years ago. But But anyway, so that's I'll say thanks for having me. It's really kind of fun to be here, especially when it's all Christmassy and stuff. I like Christmas. I'm a big kid when it comes to Christmas, so although I hate Christmas lights. I don't hate Christmas lights. Most people just do them badly. I like good Christmas lights, but I'm a snob. I'm such a bougie snob. I don't mean to be. This just happened. But it's a thing. My fiance Brandon and I will drive around, and it's become kind of a fun tradition at Christmas to drive me around various neighborhoods home in Texas and judge their lights. Because I get mad, like inordinately mad at bad lights. Like a really good display, I'm like, that's awesome. I love the way they wrap the tree in that color, and this color kind of complements that one. And I like the way that the twinkling is kind of synchronized. And oh my God, what did they do there? That's awful. They just shoved everything they could into a t-shirt cannon and blew it at their house. And they just like, you get really mad at bad Christmas. I do. I don't know why, but bad Christmas lights drive me insane. I don't know why. It's Christmas. It's stressful. I love it. Anyway, so I have like a little over an hour and 15 minutes with you people. So awesome. Let's make the most of it. So I like to do a Q&A kind of thing. I'm sure some of you have seen my panels before. So I'm not going to make you line up here and the whole stand up while I take 15 minutes to answer every question, because I'm a talker. You may have noticed. So if anyone has a question, you just raise your hand and I'll pick you, and you can project a little bit. You there in the row, yes, with the beautiful fringe on your jacket. Oh. After playing Okabe in Steins Gate, I would never time travel. I have learned that was the main lesson, is just don't mess with time. Not worth it. Not worth it. If I hadn't played Okabe and hadn't learned that lesson, I would love to go back to Victorian England. Just because I'm a big lit nerd, and so many of my favorite stories happen to take place in that time or were written during that time. So I would have loved to have been in Victorian England, or maybe the generation before in Charles Dickens's England. Would have been fun, but man, time travel, don't do it. Don't do it. Just stick where you are. It's much easier. Thank you. Good question. Oh, Okabe. I love stuff. Who here has seen Steins Gate? Oh, thank you. Of course, I would hope you guys have. I love you too. That's awesome. Steins Gate is one of those shows that I worked on, the original about 8 years ago now. And it was very, very, very close to my heart. We all of us loved that show. If you haven't seen Steins Gate, fair warning, it is an emotional beatdown. Like, it is not an easy show to watch in the sense that, oh, this is nice and light and fluffy. It goes places that are very unpleasant, but that are very rewarding. But it's one of my favorite roles I've ever gotten to tackle as an actor. And it's one of my favorite scripts I've gotten to, adaptations I've got to work on as a writer. And it was just, everything about it was a dream come true. And I'm very, very proud. I'm so proud and had such a journey working on the original that I very rarely, there are certain episodes I cannot go back and watch anymore because they're too raw for me. They're too evocative of something I went through, and I'm like, oh, nope, don't want to, trigger warning, can't do that. But yeah, highly recommended. Those of you that have not seen it, please treat yourself. But be warned, you'll watch the first 4 episodes and be like, what is this show? And then after episode 5, oh, okay, I'm on board. This is cool. This is fun. And after episode 13, you will hate that I recommended it to you, and you will have to watch the rest of it in a night. That's the typical pattern. Yes, you have a question. How did I like being Kiji in Namaka? I loved it. I love getting to be the big queens. Like, they're just fun. Kiji is so huge and over the top, and it was just a fun show. I want to cosplay Kiji at some point. It's a very involved cosplay, but I think there's enough there that I could work with. I could really disguise myself. Yes, you. Okabe from Steins Gate, actually. There have been a handful of characters. I mean, I've played, oh my God, you guys, I've been we're getting it into the territory of about 300 characters in my career. And as an actor, you develop a relationship with all of them, even Soldier A, who has one line and dies, which I've played a few times. To me, that's Ralph. He has a family. But But characters you spend a lot of time with, that like a lead character who carries a show, you're in 8 hours a day, 3-4 days a week, and that's a lot. It's very difficult on your voice to just talk that much and to talk that emotionally, because it's rare in a dramatic show of any kind to just, it's not just me talking at this level, it's me at 10 or me at 15. And Okabe was really rough. One of the reasons being I adapted the scripts when I was working as an adaptive writer for Funimation. That show came down the pike, and they were like, "This is so. You and Patrick Seitz need to write this show together." And Patrick Seitz is one of my favorite human beings on the planet. He's just a lovely man, great actor, beautiful writer. And so whenever we get to work together as writers, I would jump at the chance. And so he and I kind of leapfrogged on the show. I adapted episode 1, he adapted episode 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. And we would talk very closely about how we wanted to do it, and because it was a very challenging show to adapt for a lot of reasons, because there was a lot of in jokes that didn't gloss. So we had to kind of change it a little bit, but kind of keep the humor, but just make the reference points a little different to speak to an English-speaking audience a little clearer. And but the character of Okabe was so huge and larger than life, and his journey is so incredibly vulnerable that there was just, we could do everything with him we wanted. We could give him all these lines to say, and he can say them because he's that kind of character. So if we want to throw in a line from Tennyson, we can do it because he's the sort of character that would have that rattling around inside his skull. Oh, if we want to talk about quantum physics, we do that too. So he is everywhere, and his dialogue is extremely erratic, energetic, intelligent, and theatrical all at the same time. And through the course of the show, he goes from that to being much more vulnerable, much more unsure of himself, and that interplay between this kind of persona he affects to kind of get through life and the real him that's kind of this small, wounded, child that doesn't fit in and feels terrible. There's a lot going on there. It's a really difficult role. It was difficult to write, and I didn't write it with the intention of ever being that character, because I didn't think like that. As a writer, I don't really think, I should play this character. And, go home, everyone, I've got it. But I was given that character, and I was like, I'm playing what? I'm writing it. And while I'm writing these scripts, Patrick and I would be like, man, we do not envy the poor SOB that has to breathe life into these lines because they're going to have their work cut out for them. Oh, it's me. And then so, there's just the basic stress of going in to validate your own scripts as an actor, because you have to go in and prove that you knew what you were doing, because that line will work. Just give it to me one more time. I promise you I can make this work. And if it doesn't work, there's no one to blame but me, is what I'm saying. Because, I can't be the actor going, who wrote this? Oh, never mind. And as the writer, I can't be like, Tatum, he's just messing up. He doesn't get my meaning at all. He can't read to save his life. So it was really difficult in that sense. So every time I walked in, even though I'm working with a crew that I know very well and trust, there's still that level of, man, there's a lot riding on this because I've put so much of myself into every level of the process. And then he goes through some stuff, really goes through some stuff. It was so difficult. And because the show deals with time travel, essentially the plot of it is, without giving too much away, it's impossible to sum up in a couple of words, but I'll try. It's basically about a bunch of really smart kids that figure out how to send text messages back in time. And it's done in a very realistic way. And they start doing it, and it starts having consequences for the present in ways that are first kind of funny. And then as we get going, there are more and more tragic consequences of things that have to be undone. And it ends up costing them so much emotionally. It's really, really brutal and awesome. It's such a beautiful show. Even if I had nothing to do with it, I'd be a fan of the show because it's just perfect. And so there are moments, there's a scene in, for example, there's a scene in about episode 14, I believe it is, where, without giving anything away, he is, for the first time, we see this character who, he wears a lab coat and he thinks of himself as a mad scientist. Like he's like us growing up pretending to be Dexter from Dexter's Laboratory. That's who he is, he's like, and he's not. In reality, he's not. He is very smart and he's got a great mind, but he's a nobody. Like he's one of those people that, doesn't do well out in public because he's too, he doesn't pick up on social cues very well. So I can relate to that. And he's also he doesn't really feel like he matters. So the mad scientist persona is a coping mechanism he adopts to kind of deal with feeling like he's not that at all. And it's really funny at first, and he's the sort of character that all of his friends you can tell they kind of keep him around because he's fun to watch wear himself out. But as the show gets going, and things start happening all around him because of this stupid little, or not stupid, but this just sort of experiment they did that they didn't think very hard about the consequences of. The stakes get higher and higher, and he's forced to kind of let go of that persona that he uses to cope with feeling the way he does, because the only way he can get through and save the people he wants to save is just by being real and vulnerable. And there's a scene in this one episode where he's essentially pleading for the life of his friend at peril to his own by essentially saying, hey, all those things I say I am, I'm not. I'm none of that. I'm nothing. Here's how I actually feel about myself. And it is devastating to watch him do that. And he has to. He has no choice. It's just the way things have kind of culminated into this wonderful scene where like someone's going, yeah, what are you going to do about it? He's like, I don't know. And watching the scene to adapt it into English as a writer, I cried at home in my office, going, I'm just completely enamored of the original Seiyu's performance. And then I thought to myself, I've got to do that myself in a few weeks. Wow. And mind you, the time travel angle too, the character is jumping from timeline to timeline and revisiting things that keep happening and going wrong. And so it's very similar to what I'm doing as a writer, going, hey, I'm in the booth and I'm performing the scene I just did back home a few weeks ago when I was writing this, and wait, where am I? What timeline is it? What day is it, kind of thing? So my mind started kind of slipping into the character. And usually when you're playing a role that difficult, it's really important to find a space away from them so that you can come home at the end of the day and be like, okay, I'm going to kind of take off that character and hang them up on the rack and be Michael for the rest of the day and breathe easy and remind myself, no, I didn't actually go through that I just experienced. But it was really hard with Okabe because I would go in to record for several hours, 8 hours often a day, and then come home and have to write for another few to get my script deadlines out. So I couldn't get away from him. So I was playing him at home, and everyone that knew me just kind of like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, this is just who I am for the next few months until we're done with the show. And so I took on his persona, and I couldn't really shed him, and it became a problem. And so when we had to do that scene that I was just describing, I lost it. I had a breakdown, and I started bawling in the booth, which I don't do. I mean, I do cry. I get very involved with the characters, and if they're going through something, I'm kind of going through it too, and what happens to them hits me. But with him, I just got into it, and I started crying, and he was like, basically the line was, I'm this, I'm nothing, no one ever does believe me, please just don't kill my friend. Can't even say it now without getting little chills, but I said it and I meant it, and I just started crying and I couldn't stop, and I just kind of crumpled into this little ball in the corner, and the director, who's a dear friend, was like, Michael, you okay? And I was, no, one of those ugly cries, like when you're a kid and you've been punished and you go to your room, nobody loves me. That's what it felt like. And so Colleen was like, honey, why don't you go and like just walk around for a little bit, maybe splash some water on your face, get a coffee. I'm like, okay. Just devastated. So I'm shuffling around the building, splashing water on my face. And I'd come back and Colleen's like, okay, so we have a decision to make. Everything you gave us in that take, we could do it again if you wanted, because I know, you kind of lost control there, and you don't, as an actor, I know I wouldn't like that. But everything you gave us was beautiful and it worked. So if you don't mind everyone in the world knowing what you actually sound like having a nervous breakdown, we don't have to get a second take. And I was like, let's not get a second take. And it incidentally has become the best plug for that show I could come up with. If you want to hear J. Muckle Tatum have an absolute nervous breakdown, watch Steins Gate. It's real. Acting. So, but anyway, that was the answer to like the most difficult character I've played was him. He's still in here somewhere. And when 7 years later, when the sequel finally came down the wire, it scared me. I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to revisit this. That was really hard, but we did, and I survived, I guess. It's a really good show, but man, it's like someone said, do you love playing Okabe? I'm like, no. I mean, I'm very proud of it, but I don't love playing Okabe. I love playing Okabe, but I don't love playing Okabe. So I hope if there's ever a third season, I hope they wait another 7 years. I need the time to decompress. Anyway, sorry, rambling. Yes, you had a question over here. How did I enjoy playing Sebastian Michaelis? Love him. I love him. What's not to love? He was the exact opposite of Okabe. Easiest character I've ever done. He never gets emotional. His voice, he's never really vulnerable. I mean, he doesn't have to be. He's a demon. And he's not, despite being the titular character, that's just a fun word to say, he's not the main character. He's just kind of there to kind of, invest the plot with the stakes, but he's not the character going on the journey. It's CL. And so he's just sort of there to be the sort of easygoing sort of voice of reason, I know that every time I do that, at least 5 people go, and I want to be clear, he is a demon that wants to eat your soul. You're aware of that, right? Okay, I just want to make sure, just full disclosure, he's not relationship material. And I say that with love, but I'm like, people are like, no, he can have my soul. If you want to give it up that easily, he's got no use for it. I'm just saying, he's like, well done. That's not how you negotiate with a demon. You don't go, oh, my soul's worthless. Like, then there's nothing in it for them. You got to be like, my soul, no, I love it. And then they're like, oh, do you? Let's talk. Future reference, if you ever find yourself negotiating for your soul with a demon. That's, come into it from a place of leverage. Anyway, so I love playing Sebastian because he's really fun. I love playing Brina Palencia is one of my dearest friends in the world, and she and I have played opposite each other in at least a dozen shows over the years. I always feel that our voices bring out the best in each other because they just complement each other really well for some reason. But when I was playing Sebastian, so here's my thing about Sebastian. I don't think that he has a personality to speak of. I think he adopts whatever personality is necessary to get the job done. So he's an actor of sorts. I think being a demon, I don't think he has a true form that we could even comprehend if we saw it. That's why we never do in the show. You just see little snapshots of, a heel or a boa or whatever. But even that's not necessarily his true form. It may just be, I think he has the ability to take on the form of whoever is looking at him needs to see or is scared of or whatever. Like, I don't know that he has a form or a personality we would recognize as such because he's totally inhuman. But he's able to project what CL needs, and so he becomes kind of a father figure for him. He looks just like his father. If you see the painting of his father on the first landing of the staircase in the Phantom Eye Mansion, it's clearly Sebastian's like, oh, that's what I'm going to look like because that's who CL needs. So he's any personality that Sebastian have is kind of, I think of it as camouflage that he's wearing in order to eat. Because that's what he's doing. Like, he's ultimately going to get this kid's soul, and in order to do that, he has to get inside his head. So that's the best way to do it. So the Sebastian we know and love, with that beautiful voice, I dare say, and the sort of personality is all just a projection of CL. That's what Sebastian is like dug through his head and be like, that's what's going to work. So plucks that out of his head and puts it on. And that's how it comes across. It's a really interesting character choice to do that because then I had to really study CL. I had to study Brina's performance to kind of decide, like, oh, okay, that's how I would talk. So, I got to, Brina usually recorded first, so I could listen to her and respond because that's everything Sebastian does is a reaction to something CL says. It's also fun because every few years there seems to be more. Kind of so maybe I'll be playing Sebastian until I'm 90, which would be fun. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be an old man in a home somewhere at some point in my life. Not really upset, actually very upset that I'm saying, yes, my lord, and no one is responding. Like, yes, my lord, I'm simply one hell of a butler. Why aren't you screaming? And be like, oh, old man Tatum is having his thing again. Tips about being a voice actor, which was the second part of your question. So here's the thing and I'm going to be very real with you for a second. Well, I try to always be real, but so for anyone who here has any aspiration of becoming a voice actor specifically, there's usually a handful of people in every audience. Awesome. More power to you. Good luck. It is a difficult business to break into because it's a creative job. All creative jobs are hard because everyone wants them because that's the thing. Everyone wants to be fulfilled by what they do. Weird. So those are the jobs everyone wants. Because of that, competition is very, very, very stiff. And so one thing you have to do to get into the business, the fantasy, the dream that most people have, I know I certainly did, because I've been acting in one form or fashion since I was about 9. But it took me until I was probably in my 30s to realize, oh, that's not how this works. Like, I've got the craft down, I know how to do the job, but I don't know how to get the job. That's a whole other ball game. So they're kind of, broadly speaking, two aspects of acting, voice acting in general. There is the craft, the art side of it, the stuff that interests us. You know, I want to get into that character. I want to play that role. I want to be in that show. I want to see what that's like. That's, you know, the things that make acting attractive to us in the first place. That's the fun stuff. That's about 10% of the job. The rest of it is business. The rest of it is figuring out how to promote yourself, how to find work, how to stay sharp and current so that you can stay competitive with the scores of other very fine actors out there with whom you are competing on a daily basis. Some of them your dear friends. Like, oh, we're up for the same role. Cool. Arm wrestle you for it. It doesn't happen, but I wish it did. I'd get more roles. But I do urge anyone that wants to become an actor, period, is to really, really study the business side of it as in depth as you study the arts side of it. Because no one is going to help you. They will take advantage of you. With any industry. Whatever you're talking about, but especially if it's creative, if you're a creative type like I am, and you feel like, someone else will worry about the business. Oh, they will. and those people may well take advantage of you. There are a lot of unscrupulous agencies out there. If you don't know how to spot one, you know, there are a lot of unscrupulous producers out there that will sell you on these promises and then not come through. You have to learn how to be shrewd and how best to promote yourself. So well over half of the job is learning how to create a space for yourself so that you can do the artistic stuff. So please, 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 if you want to be an actor, study the business side of it. There's a wonderful series of books on the subject called The Art of Voice Acting, which covers both the craft and the business side of it. So it talks about like how to take care of your voice, how to, do this, do that, how to get inside a character, different ways of approaching a monologue read, all the fun stuff. And then it talks about what's a demo reel, how to know if you're getting screwed on a demo reel, how to find a good agent, there's all good stuff, which you don't think about. But also, real talk for a second, if you want to be a voice actor, be an actor. Don't worry about voice acting. I'm not a voice actor. I'm an actor who is known for his voice, but that's different. Voice acting is a really, really hard thing to get into first. I grew up on stage and a little bit of on camera growing up in Dallas, which has a really thriving theater community. I grew up from 9 years old I was on stage pretty much all the time. And that gave me the sort of backbone I needed in order to pursue other kinds of acting. But when you think about it for a second, a lot of people, I teach incidentally as well, and a lot of my students come to me and I ask them very honestly, why voice acting? Why voice acting and not on camera or stage? And, once we kind of get to the meat of the issue, it's usually because they're not comfortable with themselves. And they're not comfortable in their bodies. They don't like the way they look, or they don't like the way they walk, or there's something about their physical appearance that they are not comfortable with. Welcome to being human. That they see, like, I want to be an actor, but voice acting is the only thing I think I can do that I'm comfortable with. And I tell them invariably that that's the worst way to go about it, because voice acting is extremely artificial. The environment you're asked to perform in is the most artificial of any environment you'll be asked to act in. One of my favorite teachers, a guy named Sanford Meisner, Sandy, famously defined acting as living truthfully in imaginary circumstances, and I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. But when you're on stage, think about it for a moment. Even in front of a camera, there's a lot. I mean, that definition basically boils down to, if it's real for you, it'll be real for the audience. So you have to put yourself in a state of mind where it feels like you're actually going through this thing, so that the audience is watching you or hearing you go through this thing. That's what audiences do. I mean, that's why we watch anime or shows or read books or watch movies. It's to watch someone go through something that we spend all day, every day protecting ourselves from. We don't like being in life or death situations in real life. We don't like being heartbroken. We don't like all those things, but we need the experience. We need to feel it vicariously, so we watch actors do it. And if actors are faking it for a second, we know, and it turns us off. We feel cheated as an audience. Even if you can't quite identify what's wrong, you know what hits you and what doesn't. So an actor your first job as an actor is to make it be real for yourself. And if you, on stage, there's a lot helping you make it real. You've got costumes, sets, the scenes are playing out in real time. So it all carries the kind of weight and heft of a real thing. And on camera, much the same, although sometimes the editing breaks it up. You have to wait for hours for them to rebuild, the lighting rig or something like that so they can get a different angle. But you still are recording scenes with another person in costume and on a set that at least has the semblance of reality, so that all of the experience is carries enough truth to it that you actually get hit by something, and that's what you're performing through, rather than having to fake it. But in a box with a microphone, that's all you've got in voice acting. You've got a little booth, excuse me, and that's it. You often don't even get to record with other actors because there isn't the timing just doesn't work out that way. So you record independently of each other. So unless you have really good experience on stage or on camera, or in any other situation where, unless you've gone out and really done some living so that you have a kind of vocabulary of experience to draw from when you're having to create an experience that's not actually happening around you. It's really difficult, and a lot of young actors, actors of any age that start out in voice acting, find it really difficult to let the experience be real for them because it's such an artificial environment. So I urge anybody that wants to be an actor, a voice actor, to be an actor first. Take stage. If you are uncomfortable at the thought, awesome, be uncomfortable. It's fine to be uncomfortable. In fact, it's preferable to be uncomfortable as an actor. Audiences don't engage with people who are comfortable. We engage with people who have something to lose. We engage with people. One of my favorite quotes about acting, sorry to get all deep on you, but comes from a teacher named Anne Bogart. She said in a nutshell that art, creativity doesn't come from a place of comfort or harmony. It comes from insecurity. It comes from fear. It comes from all the things we think of as negative emotions, but that's what propels us to create, to perform, to draw, to act, to whatever. She said, so chances are, if you are not sufficiently embarrassed by what you're doing, it's not worthy of note. And think about that for a second. So if you want to be a voice actor because you want to be an actor, but you don't want to feel embarrassed, don't do that. Embarrass yourself. I do it every day. It's very rewarding. I've built this relationship now as an old man. Here I am in my 40s, and I have a very different relationship to the idea of embarrassing myself. Now I love embarrassing myself because it gives me an experience. It's just so actors, you have to just kind of learn to stop protecting yourself in acting. Acting is the one art in general, is the kind of one human field of human activity where we can experiment like that, and it doesn't necessarily cost us our lives. So if you want to be a voice actor, what I'm saying is cast your net very wide. Put yourself out there. Take workshops constantly. I teach workshops, and I still take them. Because there's always, I always look for chances to learn a new way of doing something, or learn a new way to create an experience for myself so that I can, develop as a person, as an actor. So voice acting is great and wonderful, but it should only be one of many things you're doing. So more power to you. Good luck. So thank you. Thank you for asking that question. I like to talk about that. And I don't know why these lights are flashing. I think there's a poltergeist in here. That happens. Yes, you. Oh man, I would love for there to be more Spice and Wolf. Does anyone know that show? Yeah, I love playing. That's another Brina Palencia and J. Michael Tatum duo. I just love those characters, and I would love to see more of. I'd love to get in Lawrence's head again. He's a really fun character. If you haven't seen Spice and Wolf, I highly recommend it. It's a beautifully written show. The adaptation is also one of my favorite English adaptations. Incidentally, also written by my best friend Jamie Markey. It's awesome. I love it. But honestly, any character I get a chance to revisit, except Okabe. Give him some time. Yes, you in the second row there with your hand up. Assassination Classroom? Do we have any Assassination Classroom fans here? Oh my God, that's so great. So one of my favorite things about working on that show was the way it was abbreviated on the calendar. As class, we didn't mean to. It's just the number of letters available in the field became ASCLA. And so we talk about it like, I'm coming in for ASCLA tonight. And people are like, what? Don't worry about it. I got to work on the show as an adaptive writer, and it was one of my most favorite things to write. Just because I loved writing for Sunny. Sunny playing Koro Sensei is like, you talk about a role that was just made for him. He's a delightful actor, and he has such unfailing instincts for comedy. Because Sunny just has a voice and a manner about him when he's in the booth playing characters that he can make you cry and laugh in the same breath. And that's a hard thing to do. I think comedy is really difficult to do well because it's one thing to do comedy that's kind of throwaway, funny one-liners. You know, that's all fine and good. It's clever and you can accept it as clever and you laugh, but then it doesn't really grow with you. But comedy that comes from a real place, like that, you're like, that's really funny because that's relatable. And it really says something about just the show itself, but also Sunny's performance, that he makes a weird alien octopus smiley face creature one of the most relatable creatures I've ever seen in an anime. Like, he's so wonderful. He talks in this weird vaulted language. You're welcome. But he's also incredibly kind and weird, and yet they have to kill him because that's their assignment. It's such a weird, great concept of a show, and I love weird. I love looking at a show going, I have no idea how we're going to make this work. Let's go. And I think the end result was extraordinary. But I love writing for actors like Sunny, because he was like, man, thank you. This dialogue is so much fun. It's so easy to find the soul in this. Because I got that character. I understood Koro Sensei, and the other characters too. I love Nagi. I love all of them. All the kids have their own little personality quirks, and it's so easy with an ensemble that big to just make every character about their one thing, and then that's all you really know about them. But I feel like every character in that show had a chance to shine for a moment and become complicated and human in the time allotted. That's really challenging. So my hat's off to the original creators for making such a beautiful ensemble cast. Speak so well. Shiro? Oh, he's a son of a bitch. I hate him. I love. It's always fun to play the bad guy. But yeah, I think that was just one of those things where, like, okay, cool. He's based on a real guy. Did you know that? Look up the name. I'm not going to go into detail because it's kind of inappropriate. But he was based on a real war criminal from Japan in World War II. So that name and his sort of MO are based on a real guy who did some really, really awful things. And I didn't know that until after I had done. And I'm glad I didn't know, because it would have made recording it a little less fun. But as it was, he's just kind of a big over-the-top bad guy. It's kind of, they play that fact that he's kind of, he's almost like a spoof of your classic Bond villain. But then you kind of get into his backstory and you're like, oh God, but he's evil. I have to remind myself he's not just a cartoon. He's actually a really bad person that does some really awful things. And that's another thing about the show. Like, every character, your feelings, you're like, they're complicated now. I can't just feel this one way. I now have to resolve that with what I know. I love shows that do that. And I will say, I have certain friends of mine now that I told to watch that show, and they were like, I've never heard of it. I'm like, you would like it. You would like it. Watch it. And I'm like, but just you'll hate me, but watch it. And they watch it, and now they'll just see me. I run into them at cons frequently, and I'll just see one tear rolling down their cheek. And they look at me and they go, here, and walk away. And I'm like, oh! The word here has never been more pregnant with meaning in my life than with that show. And I hear the word here, I'm like, oh! Feels. Those of you that haven't watched it have no idea what I'm talking about, and that's fine. Yes, you there with I don't have a favorite. It's because it's so hard when you've been so many characters to pick a favorite, because they're all in here. They all become like part of you, and at least for me, maybe I'm a little insane. But every character I've played is really, well, okay, let me tell you a little secret. I don't believe in character, not as an actor. A character is a judgment you guys make on what you've seen. You're like, oh, that's who that person is based on what you see them go through and the choices they make. But for me, it's like, if I'm just being me, if I'm just Michael going to order a coffee at Starbucks, I'm not thinking about my character. I'm not thinking, oh, how does Michael order a Starbucks? I mean, I just don't think like that, nor do you. If you do, oh, stop, that's not healthy. But most of us don't, and so character is a function of action. Character is what is what when we think about a character once or someone once they've done a certain thing, but they're not in the moment thinking about who they are. How do they come off? Is this choice right? You know, an actor's job is to listen. The words you're saying are more or less incidental. You know, they're just proof that you're listening. So a character is really, it's not a magical cloak that you put on and become someone you're not. Every character I've played, even the ones that seem nothing like who you're looking at now, it's just me in a different story, just me in a new context. Because every character, every role, every person you've ever met is just somewhere inside of you, but you just didn't have their life. You're not in their situation. You're not in the circumstances that bring out the facets of their personality that make the impression they do. So I don't really think, who is this character? Who must I do? I look at the story. I look at their situation. And I'm like, what would I do in that situation? Oh, cool. Yeah, that's pretty much what I would do. And then the rest of it's just technique of like, oh, do I give them an accent? Do I do this? But I do accents all the time. You know, just as me, I'll go to Starbucks. Yes, may I have a skinny vanilla latte? Whatever. So that is one of my accents. It's not fake. I mean, it's not genuine in that I'm not actually British. But if I can do the accent, that's my accent. You know, that's the accent I have in that moment. So all of which is to say, I realize this is a very long walk for a very short drink of water, but I don't have a favorite character because they're all me. They're all just different aspects of myself. So it's like picking a favorite outfit. I don't have a favorite outfit. I have a lot of favorite outfits. I have some outfits that I feel fit me better than others. I feel some outfits that, oh, that's perfect for this occasion, but I would not wear a tux at Walgreens. You know, but I would certainly wear it here kind of thing. So it just depends. And also, you know, in a sense, they're all up here and they're all me. And insofar as I remember them being different personalities, they're all up here like at Thanksgiving having an argument over, you know, turkey together. That's what they do. My head is a very crazy, weird place. And so picking a favorite just because I want to be like, oh, you know, that's a good, let's say Sebastian's my favorite. Well, then I have 300 other characters in my head going, oh, really? Awkward. We're all here. It's like the scene in, you know, Wizard of Oz when she's like, I'll miss you most of all, Scarecrow. And everyone's like, wow, we're all right here, Dorothy. But not a good look. So I feel really weird about that. So I very rarely pick a favorite. I find it much more instructive to ask what your favorite is. And the person goes, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, oh, you don't know. So imagine how much harder it is for me. But thank you for asking. I appreciate that. But yeah, they're all my favorite. Do you have a favorite character? You're like, not now. Sebastian, it's a strong choice. It's a good choice. I love Sebastian. He's never far from the surface, ever. He comes out a lot in public. In fact, I'll tell a quick story. That's a lie. It's not going to be quick. I was at a con, this is several years ago now. Quite a few, actually, almost 10. God, where does the time go? It was shortly after the show had come out and it was super popular, and we were all surprised at like how well it did and continues to do, because as an actor, you never have any inkling of how a show's going to hit. So when it does well, you're like, oh, well, that's nice. And I was at a convention, and the convention was kind of themed around several shows. One of them was Black Butler, so it was getting a lot of Black Butler love. So I was, of course, doing this voice all weekend, and one gets sort of into it and doesn't want to stop. And I was at the con at that hotel for a few days after the con was over, because I was visiting friends in that city, and so stayed to kind of have an extended vacation. But the con's over, and you guys, there are fewer things sadder in the world than a post-con hotel. It's like the circus has left town, and there's just a field with, like, you know, flyers fluttering on the breeze, and you're like, oh, I remember the elephants and the clowns and the acrobats, and now it's just wheat. And that's kind of what it feels like when a hotel goes back to that awful place we call normal. And so I was kind of walking around, and like the staff of the hotel had changed over because it was, you know, new. The people, I guess, that had worked that weekend were like, go home. So it was a new staff, so no one that knew me from on site from being around all weekend. And but I decided I wasn't quite done doing that voice. I was like, oh, fresh victims. So I went over to the concierge desk to just ask a question about like a nearby restaurant and whether or not it was in walking distance. And I did it in that voice. I was like, I beg your pardon, I've seen this restaurant here. It says, about how far is that? Is the good name? Should I walk? Is it okay? Should I get a car? And the girl, her name was Jennifer. I remember from the name tag, she goes, what are you doing? Stop. I didn't quite know why she said it, so I was like, do I give up now or do I commit? I committed. And I was like, I'm sorry, is it the accent? Some people have trouble understanding it. I do hope it's not causing a problem. And she was like, Denise, come here. Denise, not you, Denise. And so Denise, the other concierge, comes up. She's like, yeah, what's up? She's like, say something. I'm like, hello, Denise, how are you this evening? And then Denise just goes, no. See, if you were my boyfriend and you talked like that to anybody, I would kick your ass. And I realized I am now stuck in this voice for the remainder of my stay, or these women will kill me. So that's one of my favorite little Sebastian experiences. Yes, you with the big furry paw. I don't. I really don't. I hate social media for me. That's not to say that I don't engage, because sometimes you have to help a friend or to promote something you're doing that you want people to see. But I don't like I don't like being available. I don't like being that out there, because it makes everyone feel like they're kind of entitled, or not entitled to a piece of you, but that they know you. And that's a weird responsibility, because I'm like, I'm now have something to do with that person, then I don't really know them, but they know me, kind of thing. It sounds so weird to call myself famous, but I guess in the context of this business, I am. And I don't know what that means. I didn't aim for this to happen. I just like working. I like to go and explore character, or shows, or to act, to ply my trade. I never wanted to be famous for it. It was never on my radar to be known, because I also grew up on stage where you just don't get famous. Stage acting doesn't carry the heft that television acting does, or film acting does, because fewer people see it. But that's awesome, because it also frees you up to do more work, because you're not a prisoner of your persona in a way that you are if you're more visible. So it's kind of, the genie's kind of out of the bottle, and there's no going back. Twitter and Instagram and all of that are things that actors have to contend with, and producers look at your following. Look at, what's your persona online? Are you nice or approachable, or are you kind of a jerk? Do you espouse these views? All that factors into how you get hired. So my defense mechanism against that is to just not ever commit. I almost never say anything of value. Unless it's just me trying to be nice. Sometimes I get really bitchy with an airline. That's happened a lot in the past year. But for the most part, I just try to be like, hey everyone, have a good day, sort of thing. And it's not that I resent having to do it. I just don't feel like it, that if that's what, say, producers and other people in a position to hire me look at, rather than my resume, I don't know how to contend with that. I'm like, just because I may not be very good on social media doesn't mean I'm not the actor you want. And I kind of hate that producers do that. But again, it hasn't really harmed me in terms of getting work. I guess I'm of an age that I'm in a weird kind of in-between place. I remember growing up without any of that stuff. So I kind of so my brain developed without any of that being part of my sort of mental climate. But now that it's part of the everyday life, I have to deal with it. It's just there. But I kind of remember, what it was like not having it. So I don't value it in the same way that someone for whom it's always been there and it's always been the norm goes like, of course, like it's I just remember a time that, when all the social media stuff started. I'm not even sure how I got off on this tangent. But you talked about entertainment being really readily available and how that changes. In some ways, it makes it really fun to be an actor, because there's so much being produced out there. There's so much being done by so many people everywhere now. It's no longer do you have to, haul stakes out to LA to get work. It can be done. Somebody might be doing something really awesome in your hometown. that's now being seen by a lot of people because they're putting it up on YouTube or something, which is kind of fun. So there was a time when giving people advice on how to follow their acting dreams, I'd have to tell them, well, you have to move where the work is, and that's a big risk. That's a huge risk. That's for most people, a prohibitive risk. And I can't blame them for not making that move, because who would take that kind of risk for something that's not a sure thing? Who would uproot themselves from their home and family and their support group into a very unforgiving wilderness of people of like mind with whom they've got to compete? Like, that's rough. But now it's like, hey, here's the thing. If you're not getting work as a creative, you can make your own stuff. I know for me, actors are uniquely at the mercy of other creatives because unless somebody's writing something or directing something or drawing something or whatever, we're not doing anything. Like we're the closers, as it were, but we are not usually involved in the ground up process. So actors are very much at the mercy of what other creatives have done that we can work with. So I try to hone my skills in other creative endeavors so that I can create work for myself and other actors and not just wait around to come with me. Like, I have this role for you. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I have this role for myself too. So, but it comes with, the saturation makes it hard. Makes it harder for anything to hit. Makes it harder for shows to get the attention they once did, because any one product is competing with so many other things, and there's no real reliable metric for how to measure how something's going to be popular. So I think now content creators are more focused on, well, how do we just, rather than trying to kill and conquer the market, how do we just find a little foothold somewhere? How do we find that handful of people that this will really speak to? How do we get their attention? And so they have to be a little more targeted about it. And it's interesting. I'm not sure how I feel about it in the long run, but as an actor, I'm kind of grateful for some of the things, and I despise some of the things I just have to worry about. I don't like having to worry about my online persona, because it's useless. For me as a person, I'm like, I don't, in no way, shape, or form is how I come across on Twitter or Instagram even a pale reflection of who I am as a person. I'm way too complicated to sum myself up in X amount of characters. You may have noticed I talk a lot. So Twitter is like the enemy. Like, I only have how many? So it's weird. I want the rebel in me always resists summing up, because I don't like it. I don't like checking your boxes. I just want to be me. I want you to figure me out. I like being the unicorn. It's easier now. I shouldn't say easier. It's more likely that you're an outsider now than ever before. And so I think it's really important that especially young people learn the value of being an outlier. Because I did. I was very much an outlier. Have been all my life, by choice and otherwise. I'm like, oh, I'm not one of you. Cool. What do I do? So I've made that work for me. But did that answer your question at all? I'm like, I'm not even sure. You're like, what is it about entertainment? I'm like, I don't know. Thank you. You guys are asking really awesome questions. Yes, you there in the back standing up with the lovely red blazer. Ooh, the hardest accent to do. Oh, let me think. That's a good question. France was difficult. And that wasn't really, in anime it's interesting, you're not called on to do many accents because most characters have a fairly neutral tone, or neutral dialect. But with a few, I studied accents and dialects as an actor. That was one of my little areas of interest. So I studied them a lot growing up. And interesting to note, one of the reasons I fall into the sort of received pronunciation British so well is because I had a speech impediment as a kid. A very profound one, and I had a speech therapist for a number of years to help me conquer it, and she was British. So I learned to speak via a British lady, and that's why I sort of talk like this all the time. People say, where are you from? Oh, Dallas. Love watching them furrow their brow at that answer. But, and I speak French rather fluently, but had never really done the accent in not speaking French. I grew up speaking French because my grandmother was fluent. And so we just spoke it around the house all the time. And so I kind of learned English and French at the same time. It's really easy to learn one if you know the other, especially just reading it, because they're basically like I think it was Alexander Dumas, the writer of Three Musketeers, that famously tried to sit down at 40 to learn English. And he was like, this is just badly pronounced French. Whereas English people like myself like to say, oh, well, French is just English through cake. Uh, so anyway, all that is to say, like, so they asked me to come and try out for France and Hetalia, and because like, well, you speak French, so that'll make it easy, right? I'm like, sure. But I'd never tried the accent on, I'd never tried to speak English with a French accent. I speak wonderful French with a French accent, and I speak English with various English dialects, but I'd never tried to cross-pollinate the two. And it proved a real challenge because I would just slip into French. Trying to do the accent, I would be like, okay, what are you doing today? Sylvie n'a totalement prononcé la réalisation. The director, stop. Those aren't the words. Sorry, very sorry. And it was very weird, and it took a lot of doing. There's a story I've told 100 times. Why not 101? I came into the booth to do just a quick France line. It was like one line in that episode, and they had their deadline was that day, so I was like coming in to just do one line, and then it was like all of 5 minutes. And I couldn't. I had been performing as Sebastian all day with a very British accent, and British and French don't get along very well. So in my head, they were at odds. And when I came into the booth to do French, to do France rather, the words kept sort of coming out like this, and the director was like, "What are you doing? That's not here. Listen to your reference again." Yeah, I got it. Sorry, I don't know what's happening. And then I'm like, why can't I get the word? And we're like, take after take after take, and he's like, we got to go, man. We got. Come on, you're the holdout. And I'm like, I know, I'm so sorry. And there was this weird, ridiculous little blue Snuggie in the booth that someone had left. I think Caitlin may have left it there because sometimes she gets cold while recording in that booth, particularly because there's a big vent right above us. And so somebody, I think Caitlin, had left this big blue Snuggie, which I think is an absurd-looking piece of apparel. It's not to say I don't like it, but I just look at it, I'm like, wee! You look like you're wearing a giant shirt. So everyone looks 5 in one, and it's also just like someone marketed a backwards coat. That's it. Like, hey, here's a coat. You just put it on like this. So I thought it was really funny, and I was like, guys, I'm gonna put on this Snuggie. I just was getting, every now and again as an actor, you'll get these little moments of inspiration, I like to call them. Directors usually call them stupid. Where I'm like, I feel like if I touch this thing here, the line will just come out the way you want. Or if I stand this way, or if I look at you, or if I put on this outfit, or take off my shoes, I get crazy ideas like that all the time. And I'm like, oh, let's try. Can I just try doing it with just like my glasses like off? Can I try it with my shoe in my hand? And they're like, whatever, get you there. Just do the line. And so I was like, I'm just looking at this Snuggie folded nicely on the stool, thinking to myself, I'm getting kind of a weird like Frosty the Snowman magic top hat vibe from this ridiculous piece of clothing. And I thought, I'm going to put it on real quick. And he's like, sure, go for it, man. If you think it'll help. And I'm like, yeah. And so I'm also trying to be silly to kind of diffuse an awkward situation because the director's like getting impatient. I'm like, I don't know why I can't give you what you want. I'm sorry. I'm going to put on the Snuggie. Very mature of me. And I put it on, and suddenly, as if by magic, I was like, oh, there's the accent, I can do it now. I just have to put something like this on. And so I did the line, and I did a couple of other takes, and we had plenty of time, and then I took the Snuggie off, and I folded it back up, and I told the director, thank you, cool, see you next week for other episodes. Sorry it was weird, but whatever. Better luck next time. I left, and now, from that point forward, the director made sure to have that Snuggie in there for me, and I had to wear it every time. The Snuggie was then put into a locker when we finished that season, and when the second or third season came down the wire, it came out of the locker and was waiting for me every time. And I'd be in there like, hey! And I'd be ready to go, and they'd be like, okay, cool. What? We ready? They're like, put on the Snuggie. Okay. I put on the Snuggie. I was on a panel in Baltimore with the original Japanese creator of Hetalia, who had a translator with him, and also several actors, original seiyuu from the show. It was a really interesting kind of East meets West sort of panel where we had about 5 or 6 people from the English-speaking crew and a good same amount of number from the Japanese original, which is really awesome. Don't get a chance to do that very often. It was a huge honor to meet the original anime. And the guy was kind of this really funny, really kind of gruff, kind of just dude with a beard and everything, and he's and he's like got his translator with him. And every time we're talking, if someone's asking the English actors a question, they'll his interpreter is interpreting in real time in his ear, what's being said. And then somebody asked me to tell the Snuggie story on that panel, and the interpreter was like the creator, and the creator kept looking over at me, and I'm over there, of course, animated as I am, doing like the whole Snuggie view, and he's just kind of watching me very intently while his interpreter is telling him what I'm saying. And then when it's over, he just kind of goes, A year later, we were recording the new season of Hetalia, and I swear to God, as God is my witness, there was a blink and you'll miss it moment where France is wearing a Snuggie. I don't know that I had anything to do with it, but in my heart, in my movie, the original creator was just like, I'm going to put France in the Snuggie. And I had that moment. I put the Snuggie on, and then we're previewing the scene, and there's this quick cutaway. I mean, it's all of 2 seconds where like they're all sitting around a television having a slumber party, and they're all like in their footy pajamas or they're in boxers, and then France is in a Snuggie with a heart on it. And we're watching it. It's like, da, da, da. I'm like, oh my God, there's a Snuggie! So, yeah, I love that. Yes, you darling with the hood and the glasses. God, it's a great question. I have been out for a very, very long time. I'm 43 years old now, and I've been out since I was 16. And I grew up in Texas, a little rural town of Texas, so it's not easy to come out. A lot of people in Texas were like, what? But I was very blessed to have a very understanding family. I could go into that history, but my mom and my father and even my grandparents were very like, the joke I like to say is that I was such a weird kid that they were glad gay was all I was. They're like, oh God, you're not a serial killer, thank God, we'll take gay. But the truth is, there was another family member a generation back was gay, and there was some problems with that family member and the relationship, and I think my family learned how to better handle having a member of the family that was on, part of the rainbow, as it were. And so when I came along, they were like, okay, we're ready. We're not going to screw it up this time. And so I was very blessed with a family that were just kind of like, okay, cool. How do we do this? And I was like, I don't know. We'll take this journey together. And many of my friends weren't so lucky. A lot of them came from very not understanding households. And some of them have since developed a relationship with their family and repaired bridges, so to speak. Others have just, whatever. Not had any contact and gone on to find their own families that did understand them, thank God. But as an actor, it was never a problem because, and I credit theater especially for being a huge part of how I had the strength to come out, because theater, by some weird twist of fate, has traditionally been a place where people who don't fit in can go and feel like they belong. It's theater. It's also a great way to kind of win my own back as a gay young man on stage playing usually straight characters. It was really fun and kind of spiteful in a way to be like, oh, I'm gay and you can't handle that? Watch me play one of you. And I'm like, and what, here I am, a gay man playing like lead roles, men's men on stage, and like totally the audience is just eating out of my hand. And when they learn I'm gay, they're like, what? I'm like, yeah. So it's kind of cool, and I also learned I'm also tend to be very funny. I tend to poke a lot of fun at myself, but also just I'm very witty and I like to call back jokes kind of thing. And that I avoided a lot of through trial and error, I should add. There was a lot of bullying when I was a kid, but I kind of surmounted it as a young person because I got really good at stealing bullies' thunder. If I could make more fun of myself than they could, if my quips were funnier than theirs, they just gave up. And they were like, damn, that's good. I also tried to make myself as one of my coping mechanisms, my strategies, was to try to make myself indispensable to people. So, I would try to be extremely helpful or very knowledgeable. I was the smart, nerdy kid. So I was the kind of kid that, I may have been gay and weird, but man, I could tutor you in math. So if you needed help on that test, Go to Tatum, he'll help you out. And then, so I was for a long time what they called one of the good ones. So I hate that phrase, but it helped me survive. Kind of living up to that stereotype, as it were. And as I became an actor, I realized, like, cool, it's not a problem with anybody, because on stage, it's just kind of, that's how it is. The industry has been traditionally very open. And getting into voice acting, we kind of created the voice acting industry. I mean, I shouldn't say we created it. It was around long before we came into the fold. But I'd been a stage actor for a long time, and Funimation was just this little company known for doing Dragon Ball when they were looking for actors to fill all these roles, because they were suddenly getting all these shows that they needed to dub, and they only had a handful of actors that they knew, and they're like, we have to branch out. So they had to go out to theater places. Basically, hey, any actors want to do this? And so we did, and they had to deal with us as we were. So I have never had a problem. I've never had an issue with anyone going, yeah, we'd love to give you this part, but you're so open about being gay. We're not comfortable with that. I've never had that talk. And I don't know anyone in this industry who was brave enough to try that on me. So I'm at a place of power, as it were, where I can be like, oh yeah, sure. Please try to tell me not to things. So no one ever does. And it's kind of nice. And also, anime, guys. Come to anime cons and no one has ever been really weirded out by it. I'm like, because we're all outsiders in a way. We're all nerds. We all have trouble fitting in as far as the normals are concerned. So we relate to each other on a deep level. One of my favorite things about getting to do this as a profession is the cons. So I get to go and meet people that are like, oh, family. So I've never had I don't know how unique my story is. I hope it's not terribly, but I know a lot of other actors in the rainbow that are thriving and getting work and that don't have that problem. That's not to say that the industry as a whole, the world as a whole, doesn't have a long way to go, but things are certainly easier now than it was when I was in my teens. So we're getting there, slowly but surely. So thank you. That's a really good question. Appreciate that. All right, so I have like 10 minutes left. So I'm going to try to do lightning round. And I'm going to fail. I know it's on me. So I'm going to try and I'm going to answer as concisely as possible. Yes, you, my dear, with the really cool cardigan and the glasses right there in the fourth row. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, there's so many examples. One of my favorites was I got to work on the Lobelia episode of Oron. And there's a moment where they call Haruhi a daikon radish. And it's really funny because in that moment she's animated to look like a daikon radish. It's to kind of support the joke, but it makes no sense to an American audience because we don't understand what that means. It's a non sequitur. It's like, oh, you're such a radish. Like, people say that and you laugh because it just, what? What? But what they mean is like what we would say, oh, she's a bad actor. She's wooden. She's a ham. It's just a different figure of speech for us that's talking about the same thing. And it was really funny. I was like, what do I do with this line? Because I can't call her a ham and then have her look like a radish. That's going to take them out of it. And so I'm like, we're just going to call her a radish and let it go with that. And so sometimes you have to leave things alone. But there's all sorts of things. When you have to deal with honorifics, also one of the hardest things to translate, there's a manner of speaking. There's a type, and this does not exist in English at all. But in Japanese, there's a thing called keigo, where you have to conjugate your verbs differently to reflect the relationship you have to the person you're speaking with. So if they are your superior, you have to conjugate your verbs in a very weird way. We don't conjugate verbs in English. So Japanese have to do that, and it's like, oh crap, now a line that's hello is now 500 syllables. We don't do that in English. There's nothing similar. The closest equivalent is maybe someone talking a little more formally and maybe not contracting words because it sounds, impolite. But other than that, we don't. Words don't become longer or shorter in our language based on if we're talking to our boss or our subordinate. Quick story. So my partner, everyone's like, sure. I had a quick story, and this may be the one that wraps up the panel because it's one of my favorite examples of English and Japanese not so much getting along. My partner, Brandon, is fluent in Japanese. He lived there for a time and is like into level fluency, which is really hard for an English speaker to be. It's almost native level, and he's profoundly good. I know just enough Japanese to get myself in deep shit. And but I know a little bit. And every time he and I are together at a convention, if there's a Japanese guest or guests there, Brandon goes and talks to them in Japanese, and they just light up. Because, I mean, imagine if you're a guest in a foreign land, no one speaks your language. You have interpreters, but they're not there to initiate conversation. They're there to be available if someone wants to talk to you. But for the most part, you're going to keep to yourself because you're jet lagged, you're tired, you don't really know how do I get into that conversation because I don't know what's being said. So they kind of keep to themselves. And Brandon will be like, oh, none of that. Go over and introduce himself. And they just go, oh my God, it's so nice to see you. Oh, no, your Japanese is so good. And I saw him talking to this group of what turned out to be pretty important producers over there. And I'm being Michael in the other corner with everyone else having a drink. Blah, 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 blah. So I'm the loud American in the room. And Brandon is over there speaking very polite Keigo Japanese to these people. And I had just learned a phrase earlier that day from a friend of ours. The phrase was azas, which is a really cool, hip, ridiculous way of saying thank you. There's no real translation for it. It's basically arigatou gozaimasu, but take out everything but the first and last sounds. You just smash those two together, so arigatou gozaimasu becomes azas. It's super bro. It's super street and hip, and you would never in a million years say it to someone that you just met. Especially if they were older than you, and especially if they were a producer and you were an actor. Can you tell where the story is going yet? So I am just talking away to some people over here, and I hear Brandon say the magic word, Sebastian. And they all turn to me, and he's just told them that I play Sebastian in Black Butler. And even though they've never met me or have ever heard a word of the English translation, anyone that's touched that role is special to them because Sebastian is so unbelievably popular in Japan. And they go, oh, and so they're all looking and pointing at me, and I'm like, oh, and Brandon's like, come. So I come, and he's like, and Brandon introduced me in Japanese, and I kind of wave, and I'm being very demure and quiet, and he goes like, babe, you use your Japanese, and I'm like, okay. So I say in my best Japanese, which is a very polite way of saying, I have a little bit of Japanese, but I'm not very good at it yet. It's a very polite way of saying, bear with me, I'm American. And the oldest gentleman in the bunch, clearly the trendsetter, turned to me and in very good English said, wow, you sound really good. And I just went, it's us. And the room just stopped. It was a record scratch moment where I was like, Azas! And he just kind of goes. And the others, like everyone else in his entourage, were like I could just feel them. And Brandon has this look he gives me when I've messed up. And it's just this look, it's like the disappointed mom look. It's the. And I just kind of like, oh, wah, wah. But then something magical happened. Then the guy I said it to went, and then everyone else was like, ha, 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 we can, ha, 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 ha. And then they all just started like cracking up and thought it was the funniest thing. And so for the rest of that, now I got explained to me by Brandon that what I had done from going to this wonderful phrase, watashi wa nihongo ga skoshi wakarimasu demo maru jasen into azas, is the equivalent. If I were translating that into English for the same effect, I would give you Shakespeare. And it's like giving thee to be or not to be, whether 'tis nobler the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing in them, bitches, is what I had done. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, I continue with that, but because they all had such great sense of humor about it, for the rest of that weekend, every time I saw one of the Japanese guests, they were like, Michael, Azaz! Thank you guys so much for coming. You've been awesome. I have autographs in just a little while. Please come by my table if you like. If you don't know where to find me, look on the map. It's pretty easy. Also, just follow the sound of the loud guy saying Azaz. So, bye, I love you.